Hello everyone, I'm Brazen Eagle, and thank you for joining me here today. So, we have two articles this time from, of course, Breitbart. Democrats sneak amnesty power to future president in 2020 Pentagon bill. The 2020 Pentagon spending bill contains a camouflaged provision allowing any U.S. president to amnesty millions of illegal immigrants regardless of the shock to Americans' wages, workplaces, and communities, says a former immigration judge. It takes a little bit of digging to get to Title 10, Subtitle H, Section 1099C, on page 1061 of NDAA 2020, which is captioned Parole in Place for Members of the Armed Forces, says Andrew Arthur, a former immigration judge who now works with the Center for Immigration Studies. The critical language is hidden in the short section, which apparently provides a modest immigration reward to foreign service members, saying, "It is the sense of Congress that parole in place reinforces family unity. Disruption to service members must be minimized in order to faithfully execute their objectives. Separation of family or military families must be prevented. Congress reaffirms parole in place authority for the Secretary of Homeland Security." The last line will be cited as legal authority for a future president to offer the parole in place to as many migrants as he might wish to provide, said Andrew. Expect Section 1099C B1 and 6 of NDAA 2020 to be used by a future president to grant future amnesties. DACA and DAPA rest on the slim reed of prosecutorial discretion. The next administrative action to grant status to those who entered illegally, on the other hand, will set firmly on the rock of Congress's reaffirmation of parole in place authority for the Secretary of Homeland Security. And a future Democratic president, such as potentially President Bernie Sanders, could be just waiting for that opportunity. Current law and White House policy say parole in place can only be provided case by case, said Andrew. When individual migrants are given the parole in place status, they can get legal work permits and also request an adjustment of status to get green cards and, of course, citizenship. In June, Senator Kamala Harris promised to use the case-by-case parole power to provide an amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants, according to Huffington Post, or the HuffPost.com. Many of the country's roughly 2 million dreamers would gain a pathway to citizenship under a plan released Wednesday by 2020 Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris, who would use executive action to break through congressional deadlock. In a plan that reflects the creative legal thinking of California's former Attorney General, Harris would reinstate the Obama-era DACA program and remove the age restrictions on applying, but unlike the original program, which gives work authorizations and provides deportation relief to unauthorized migrants who arrived as children, the plan would open up a pathway to citizenship without requiring Congress to pass legislation. Under the proposed plan, Harris would use executive action to grant Dreamers parole in place and retroactively issue them work authorizations. That legal exception, carved out in the Immigration and Nationality Act but not typically used for Dreamers in the past, would allow them to apply for green cards through a direct family member or employer. Those who obtain legal permanent residence are allowed to apply for citizenship. The GOP's congressional staffers are paid to find and delete legal time bombs, such as the parole in place language, before the law is approved, of course. But once signed into law, it will remain law unless several determined GOP legislatures get Congress to delete the amnesty loophole. Somehow, a Kamala Harris talking point is about to become law, introduced before our very eyes through its initial application to a very select and sympathetic group of aliens, Andrew wrote. You can expect it to get much, much bigger and blossom into a full-grown amnesty at some point during a future administration. Likely sooner rather than later. So, frankly, this isn't really surprising. We've known about this for years, if not decades, really. That, of course, the Democrats are trying or thinking about who their future voter base will be. And, of course, they're doing whatever they can to socially tear apart the country in the name of supposed progress or progressivism. It's all about power. That's all it is. And the ability to maintain that same level of power. And of course, illegal immigrants are a potential future voting bloc as the electorate continues to expand. Of course, this will only stop if people choose to act, but we have another article detailing how it's not just Democrats trying to culturally alter and potentially destroy the United States. So, GOP Senator Mike Lee predicts quick passage of the S.386 Visa to Voter bill. Democrat Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois and GOP Senator Mike Lee, a Republican from Utah, predicted Wednesday, so this article is a few days old, that they would pass the revised bill, which opens a new pathway for more foreign temporary workers to stay, take Americans' jobs, and lobby for, of course, more green cards. I'm very pleased with the outcome of these negotiations, said Senator Mike Lee in a Senate speech on Wednesday. He continued, I'm going to make sure we've got the buy-in that we need from the Republican senators. I want to make sure that the GOP co-sponsors of the legislation are comfortable with what we negotiated and they understand it. I have every hope and expectation and confidence that this is going to result in something that can pass and will soon pass with unanimous support of the members of this body. Illinois Democrat Senator Dick Durbin was more cautious, saying, we've come up with a proposal which I think moves us in the right direction, a bipartisan agreement which we are now hoping to offer to the Senate for consideration as quickly as possible. The Lee-Durbin bills pitched as a way to reduce the multi-year backlog of 600,000 Indians who are waiting for green cards. The Indians were imported by companies to take potential jobs away from American graduates, always with the promise of getting green cards after several years. But the flood of Indian workers is far greater than the measly 20,000 green cards allocated to India each year, so thus a backlog. The Lee-Durbin bill reduces the relevance of the backlog by creating a new early adjustment status between temporary visa workers and green card permanent legal residents. This early adjustment status gives the Indian workers a renewable work permit and full workplace rights even before they can get their green card or citizenship. The new status is intended to encourage the Indian workers to stay until they eventually get the hugely valuable green cards in exchange for taking jobs from Americans. Lee's legislation appears to comply with the GOP demand that he should not increase the inflow of new immigrants, most of whom vote en bloc against the GOP's base of America First Americans. But the bill does create huge problems for the Republicans by dramatically raising the population of foreign workers in the U.S. and by reducing the number of temporary workers who go home. If the bill passes, more foreigners will try to get jobs in the U.S., and more will apply for green cards because the bill's early adjustment benefit is open to many temporary workers, says Jessica Vaughn, Policy Director at the Center for Immigration Studies. She added, the Durbin-Lee deal might be called the Staple a Job Offer and Work Permit to Your Temporary Visa Bill. Under the bill, anyone on a long-term temporary visa who finds a professional job well after a wait of 270 days will be able to obtain a 3-year renewable work permit and permission to travel in and out of the country. It will be a status comparable to green card status, but without having to wait in line or be restricted by annual immigration limits. It will potentially apply to hundreds of thousands of people each year, including foreign students, exchange visitors, NAFTA workers, investors, and of course more. There are no caps on the number of current work visas, and the Lee-Durbin bill includes no caps on the number of people who can ask for green cards and get early adjustment. In fact, Durbin has pushed for much greater immigration, saying that American families must accommodate the world's ambition to be part of the future America, or future of America. The rising foreign population allowed by the Lee-Durbin bill will lobby Congress to allow more immigration. The political pressure will also come from the many non-Indian migrants who will be forced to wait in the Indian backlog by the Lee-Durbin bill. Congress allows companies and universities to keep an army of roughly 1.5 million college graduate workers in jobs sought by U.S. college graduates. This huge workforce is delivered by the H-1B, OPT, TN, J-1, L-1, and H-4 EAD visa worker programs. These foreign graduates help investors to suppress salaries for U.S. graduates. The suppression is very valuable to investors because it raises their stock values by $10 for every $1 they cut from payrolls. In addition, Congress also allows a population of roughly 2 million foreign blue-collar workers to get work permits via a large variety of avenues. The avenues include asylum requests, the DACA amnesty, advanced parole, and adjustment of status requests. Current laws curb the award of green cards and forces many of these foreign workers to go home or become illegal aliens. The Lee-Durbin bill would remove those curbs and so encourage far more foreign workers to seek U.S. jobs, green cards, and citizenship. But even without the Lee-Durbin changes, the huge current inflow of foreign workers reduces salaries for American graduates, shrinks wages for blue-collar Americans, and drives up rents for people who live in cities such as Washington, D.C. And of course, in turn, the rising diversity and declining wages encourage Americans to vote for big government politicians, although this impact on Americans is ignored by the vast majority of establishment reporters who prefer to write about migrants' concerns. The original version of this bill has also been opposed by multiplying groups of college graduate, Twitter-using activists who have shown how Lee mobilized India's workforce in the U.S. to pressure U.S. senators to help them get green cards. The bill's authors have not publicly addressed the inevitable manipulation of the early adjustment status by clever migrants, lawyers, and investors. For example, economic migrants will be able to buy the renewable early adjustment work permits from corrupt companies, predicted Kine Lin, founder of U.S. Tech Workers. And the person wrote, "Consider the incentives these changes create. They would encourage every foreign worker in the U.S. to file a green card application, secure an early adjustment status, and remain in the U.S. indefinitely. This would effectively increase immigration numbers, something Senator Lee insists his bill with Dick Durbin wouldn't do. Once migrants get the Lee-Durbin early adjustment status, they will have the time and money to get green cards via a variety of legal routes, such as marriage or birth of a child. 5 years later, the migrants will be allowed to become citizens and vote, likely for, of course, Democrats, their future voter base. This visa to voter process has already turned New Jersey, New York, California, and Virginia into Democrat-dominated states. It's all about money and power, it seems like. The Durbin-Lee bill includes big benefits for investors and real estate owners, but few useful protections for American workers or voters, say opponents. The Durbin-Lee bill excludes reforms to ensure new workers are highly skilled or highly paid, says Vaughn. Everyone without qualifying job offer gets a say with a work permit, she said, adding, "It does not explicitly prevent employers from replacing U.S. workers with visa workers. It does not tighten the skills or occupational or educational standards for visas. It does not increase the total number of green cards, but certainly will increase the number of temporary visa workers who expect to stay, and will encourage more employers to lower their labor costs by hiring foreign workers who gain access to the labor market by obtaining a temporary visa." Durbin described the bill as good for the Indian migrants who took jobs from Americans. The Indian workers in the backlog are at risk of being deported even as they go into their teenage years, claimed Durbin, adding that it's a horrible situation, it's really a heartbreaking situation, and I've come to meet and know many of the families affected by it. These families affected by this backlog are really going through hardship and concerns that no family should face. The sooner we resolve them, the better. As I've talked to many of these families, they said, "Why don't you sit down with Senator Lee and see if you can reach an agreement?" I did. We have. Now I hope we can move forward. It sounds like he doesn't care about Americans. Pretty normal. But the Lee-Durbin bill will create a bigger green card backlog for non-Indians by putting the 600,000 Indians ahead of non-Indian migrant workers who will be sponsored for green cards after the bill is signed. The bill also creates problems for employers who fear the exclusion of Chinese scientists, Mexican dairy workers, Filipino nurses and therapists, Latin American baseball players, as well as the South American migrants sought by Florida employers. Many of the Indian workers in the backlog have also been promised green cards by Indian hiring managers at U.S. companies, Indian employees told Breitbart News. The managers prefer Indians over American graduates because the managers prefer Indian-style workplace rules, the Indian sources told Breitbart. And that was the end of this article. So, it's not just the Democrats. It's also the Republicans having their way with the country. So, really, what it sounds like, we're trading, or potentially going to trade, short-term money-making for long-term potential social consequences. That's pretty much all it is. Some might make the case that, if we hire more of these Indians instead of native-born Americans, then the cost of whatever products come out of this will go down. And that's a possibility. That's a real possibility that might make us a tiny bit wealthier in the short term. However, that's not a guarantee, and all actions have some sort of consequences. For example, I have 2 articles here discussing that America imports workers who will work for less than your standard average American. Are U.S. jobs vulnerable to workers with H-1B visas? From August 13th, 2017, from, of course, 60 Minutes, and another one from the Huff Post, which I usually don't agree on with a lot of stuff. But anyways, American lose jobs to H-1B visa workers. This is from 2016, updated in 2017. Some American workers are literally being replaced with immigrants, And to be frank with you, it isn't the immigrants' fault. It could be Indians, it could be El Salvadorans, it could be anyone, really. It isn't the immigrants' fault. If I were in the immigrants' shoes and offered the chance to work in the United States, I'd probably do the same thing. It only makes sense for them. It is business, though, and the government working together in order to import the cheapest possible labor for potentially, maybe, the lowest possible price. It's all about money. Like I said on this channel before, I like money. I don't love it, I need it, but money's great, but there are real consequences that are not being thought of in the long run, or at least appearing to be. Let's say we continue with this program of replacing native-born Americans with more, cheaper labor. Those people that we import, of course, bring their culture and certain lifestyle, which isn't inherently bad. In time, those migrants, those immigrants, will learn at the very least a broken version of English. However, the question remains, will they culturally be Americans? Will they celebrate things like Christmas, the 4th of July, Thanksgiving? Will they learn about the history of the United States, maybe, and fly the American flag instead of the flag of India, Mexico, or the flag of the Philippines, as this article talked about earlier? Some immigrants, they might. But some of them won't, because America doesn't really assimilate people anymore. We used to forcibly assimilate people. Some people didn't like that, but it worked. You must assimilate everyone who comes in to your country, or your culture could end up dying in the name of diversity. It takes, though, a lot of time to assimilate people. It doesn't matter who, it takes time. It takes years, if not decades, to fully assimilate people. And even then, they might not be fully assimilated. You must wait at least another generation to see if your efforts of assimilation have fully transferred into those people. However, if we were to assimilate these new immigrants, then you know what? Maybe we could take the best elements of their cultures and perhaps integrate them into the U.S. Maybe. It sounds like that's okay as long as it happens, but in the current moment, I don't think it is. A forced assimilation is dead. Of course, until we have the major crisis that will result within, most likely, at least the next few decades, if not potentially the next year in 2020. But anyways, at the end of the day, it's about how businesses and the government wanting to make as much money in the short term and screwing over everyone in the long term. You, me, people that aren't even born yet are getting screwed over because of this. This type of thinking will have severe consequences. And you know what? Both parties are doing this. Both parties. But anyways, thank you very much for watching. I'm Brazen Eagle, and I hope you have a great day.